absolutely crucial. So I think that we have to continue the pressure. We have to, of course, work to get more Democrats elected to the House, work to ensure people like Crescent Hardy are no longer there, and continue the pressure to make sure that we can actually get that legislation called to a vote. As far as DACA is concerned, I do believe that we can continue to, in the meantime, deal with the situation through executive action. I fully support DACA, and I fully support the expansion to parents of DACA-eligible children as well, and hopefully the Supreme Court will rule that that's constitutional, and I will fully support, as I have in the past, DACA.
Thank you. I don't know that I can add much to that. I support comprehensive immigration reform. You know, the president's hand was forced. I agree with the fact that he had to take executive action to get these things done. You know, the Gang of Eights bill of 2013 passed the United States Senate, and it can't get through the House. It doesn't make much sense. So we have to keep pushing forward. And no, I don't think we should do it piecemeal. I think we need comprehensive immigration reform. I support DACA and DAPA, and will do everything I can to move those forward in the future. It's a travesty, I think, the presidential candidates' discourse on the Republican side on this, just driving this country apart farther as opposed to trying to bring us together.
John, many people think that the way to handle the unauthorized immigrant population is to not give them citizenship rights, not give them a path to citizenship, but merely make them legal. In other words, it's okay for you to stay here, but you will never get to vote. Do you support that route to comprehensive immigration reform compromise?
I do not. Look, I think there ought to be a process, and there's a line, and there's the back of the line, and there's things that you need to do. If you have to pay fines, pay anything, back taxes, things that you need to do those. No, I wouldn't support that type of compromise. I would support a process. The process now is crazy, right? I mean, it's 10 plus years, potentially, even if you ever get through that process, and that's too long. But no, I wouldn't support that.
Immigration is a topic that is very close to my heart because, as I alluded to in my opening statement, I am an immigrant myself. My family is a perfect example of what can happen when you give somebody an opportunity to succeed in America. We are beneficiaries of Ronald Reagan's 1986 amnesty. And so we are a perfect example that if you give us an opportunity, like most immigrant families, they're hardworking, honest people, of what we can become. And number two, I just want to say, you mentioned Marco Rubio. It is such a shame that you have Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, two sons of immigrants, in the Republican debates trying to out-conservative each other and talking about who can keep more immigrants out of the country. That is un-American. And you know what? I believe in supporting comprehensive immigration reform. I believe in not only immigration reform, but immigration reform that includes a path to citizenship. Because you know what? Resident alien and green card status is not enough. If you come here, you're willing to learn English, play by the rules, stay out of trouble, get a good education, pay back taxes, and standing back of the line, you should be afforded an opportunity to succeed, just like my family and I were afforded one.
Would you sacrifice an immigration deal and stay firm on a path of citizenship? What if the only way to get an immigration package is to give that up?
As long as the package includes a path to citizenship. If that is the first compromise we have to make,
No, it's not going to happen. You have to give that up to get to it.
then I will not. I support immigration reform that includes a path to citizenship. Because if the people are here working hard, staying out of trouble, they're not criminals, they're not rapists, like Donald Trump says they are, they should have an opportunity to be not only resident aliens, but citizens of the United States of America.
Thank you. I, like everyone here, do support a comprehensive immigration package, including a path to citizenship. I do want to point out that the current holder of Congressional District 4 seat has voted to defund Obama's executive action, Dreamer Action, has also voted for piecemeal immigration reform rather than comprehensive immigration reform. So first and foremost, he's got to go. That being said, I want to bring up a story of how important this is. Just today at Communities and Schools, a few of our site coordinators dealt with a family that was living here. The father got hurt. They got almost kicked out of their apartment, 6 kids, and there was no access to any emergency services for that family because they didn't have documentation. Fortunately, we were able to convene community resources and get them the emergency funds so they can stay in the apartment. But really, our families need to not live in fear. They need to have the economic security, and their children need to have access to a better future through that economic security.
Susie, and would you support, if the deal breaker were, we will not allow the unauthorized to pass to citizenship, and the only way we will have a deal on comprehensive reform is if you agree to allow them to be here legally but never to become citizens, would you vote for that package?
I would not. I think that we need a path to citizenship. This country was founded on immigration, and we are a country of immigrants, and we need to offer a path to citizenship.
All right, our next question is Obamacare. And I think it's, Ruben, is it, John, is your turn to start. He's got such an innocent face, right? But not really. All right. So healthcare, as you all know, Obamacare is really the keystone of what this administration has been able to achieve. As of January 9, enrollment in private plans throughout Nevada reached 77,000 people. But that still meant that 350,000 Nevadans remained uninsured. Immigrants are not eligible for Obamacare. And most recently, our own Nevada Health Exchange gave up the towel in terms of how Nevadans were going to handle health insurance and went to the federal system. Of course, we spent $10 million after we gave up the towel on the Nevada Health Insurance Exchange. Many Nevadans who are checking in to see if they can purchase health care are finding out that health insurance is more expensive and that their coverage is skimpier under Obamacare. I heard the State of the Union, and President Obama told me this is something I should be happy about. Are you happy about it, John? And what would you do to improve it? Or would you say stay as is?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I was in the legislature in 2011 when we approved the Silver State Health Exchange, allowing the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. And so a number of Nevada citizens are able to have health insurance now that wouldn't have had it before. And as you noted, people in the minority community are disparately affected by that. So yes, I support the Affordable Care Act. I would support expanding that and making some changes to it. I also think that it makes sense that that we should expand Medicaid as well. I think we can take the best of all the ideas out there to make a better system where everybody sees having health insurance as a possibility and a potential that they can realize. I would also say I understand the issue of cost. My own company tries to give great benefits to folks. We had to start charging for health care for members of your family and others because we were getting taxed on a Cadillac type tax plan. So that is one thing that I would change right away, is the Cadillac plan provision, so that when you do offer good health care, you're not being taxed on that.
John, what would you say to that Nevadan who has to pay twice as much under Obamacare and gets half as much?
Well, I would hope that folks aren't paying twice as much and getting half as much, but Like I said, I've realized it myself in my own company where we've had to charge, and so our costs have gone up. But I'm a human being as well. So if more people are being covered and more people have health insurance, I'm okay with paying a little bit more so that more people will be covered, because in the end, fiscally also, it should result in everybody's costs going down.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly support the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, for a few reasons. And first of all, I want to say thank you to President Obama for making this his legacy. Because of this Affordable Care Act, now millions of Americans, including thousands here in the state of Nevada, have health insurance. Not only health insurance, but if you have a son or daughter that's under 26 years old, now you can keep them in your health insurance until they're 26. If you had a pre-existing condition, you cannot get denied by the health by the insurance companies. And number three, for the women who need exams, they cannot get denied. So overall, Obamacare has worked, and it is a shame that Republicans like Crescent Hardy have voted over 60 times to repeal Obamacare. And not only have they voted to repeal it, they haven't offered any alternative to Obamacare. So not only do they want people to not have health insurance, they haven't even offered a way to offer them health insurance. And so it is a shame that our congressman has voted to repeal Obamacare over 6 times in only 1 year that he's been in office. And so I will continue fighting to protect Obamacare and to make sure that we make health insurance more affordable.
Follow the same tough question, and that is, what do you say to that Nevadan who has to pay twice as much and gets half as much?
Look, what I will say this is, it's based on the income level, right? If somebody's making more, that means that they can afford it, right? They're making maybe just a little bit more. But for the person who lives in the 4th Congressional District, a middle-class family, just like my family, or maybe somebody who is without a job, now this is going to give them an opportunity to be able to afford health insurance. And not only that, but look, at the end of the day, if some of these folks don't have health insurance, they're going to end up at the hospitals, our public hospitals here, and then the state's going to have to pay for it, and then it's going to be a cost for all of us. And so for me, I will say that as long as we continue expanding health insurance for the working class people, the people who need it the most, it's a good thing.
Thanks. I have a personal commitment to upholding and fighting to preserve the Affordable Care Act. My father was laid off despite doing everything right and working hard and playing by the rules. At the age of 56, he got laid off from his steel company job. Never was able to find the same level of sustainable long-term employment after that. And because of that, he had to look for health insurance on the market, and both he and my mother had pre-existing conditions. At the age of 64, exactly 1 month before she qualified for Medicare, she had a devastating heart attack, and the hospital charged them $68,000, and their house was worth $80,000. And fortunately, we were able to figure out that an insurance company would have paid $20,000 on that same bill. That being said, I am a defender of the Affordable Care Act. Millions of people now have access to health coverage. I think we need to give the Affordable Care Act time to work. And I will fight any effort, unlike Crescent Hardy, to repeal it outright. I do think we can look at opportunities to reduce costs and expand coverage and expand Medicaid in states that don't have it.
Constituent who calls you up and says, I'm looking here at the Nevada healthcare insurance, and all I can find is something that is twice as expensive as I had last year, and now my deductible, instead of being $1,000, is $10,000.
I want to admit I am not an expert on the Affordable Care Act, and it is certainly something that I will look into in depth. I do think there's opportunities for us to look at how we control what hospitals charge and look at how we control pharmaceutical costs. For instance, Medicare, because of a loophole, cannot negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to keep the cost of pharmaceuticals down. I think there is room for us to look at opportunities on how we reduce costs, and it's certainly something I'd look at. But again, I contend I want to give the Affordable Care Act time to work.
Thank you. I'll actually answer your question first. I would tell that person not to vote for a Republican. At the end of the day, the Affordable Health Care Act has done incredible things for people. All of the things that have been noted already. But ultimately, it does need some fixing. We still have increasing healthcare costs. We still have out of control costs of prescription medicines. And frankly, it's unacceptable. And ultimately, unless Republicans stop fighting for fixes to the ACA, it's going to be very difficult to control those costs in the future. Ultimately, that's why I believe we should be fighting for more. We are the only industrialized country in the world who doesn't offer healthcare as a right to every single person. We're the only country, industrialized country, who says, you know, you can go to a doctor, but only if you can afford it. You can have healthcare, but only if you're privileged enough to be able to pay for it. And so I actually believe that we should be fighting for an expansion of healthcare. I believe that we should be fighting for universal healthcare. And frankly, until we start to vote and put people in Congress who is willing to fight for that expansion, but also willing to make the necessary fixes in the meantime to the ACA, we are still going to have, unfortunately, millions of folks out there and families right here in our backyard who are still struggling with their health care, and we absolutely need to focus on doing something about that.
Is it Ruben now, or that starts? Yes, thank you. I'm losing track. So you have a lot of veterans in CD4, and when we look at the performance of the Veterans Affairs Department, it has really been disappointing. Instead of wait times being reduced from the scandal that we saw last year, it's now 50% higher. And worse, the Veterans Department is now nearly $3 billion in debt. Should Americans continue to throw money at this problem, or is there another alternative so our servicemen and women can get the care that they deserve?
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank the veterans who are out there, as Richard Carrion, as Senator Spearman, and a few others. Thank you for your service to our country. Ruben De Silva, thank you for your service. And I want to say, first and foremost, that it is a shame that if somebody goes out there and defends our country and our freedoms, if they go overseas or anywhere in the world protecting our freedoms, it is a shame that when they come back here, they cannot receive the proper services that they deserve. Anyway, from mental health services to workforce training, to being able to find a job. You know, I believe that the most qualified people that can fill some of the jobs out here are veterans, because they're well trained. And that is exactly why this past legislative session, I teamed up with Assemblyman Elliot Anderson to provide more services, mental health services for veterans here in the state of Nevada. That is why I supported and co-sponsored a bill by Senator Spearman that would have provided free child care for parents who were here and their spouses were deployed in other countries. Unfortunately, Republicans like President Hardy opposed this piece of legislation. But they were very proud to stand up and talk about how they support veterans, yet they voted against this bill. And so we're going to continue fighting for the veterans to make sure that they receive what they have earned and what they deserve.
Ruben, is the question, is the solution having the taxpayer just spend more billions in terms of what's happening with veterans care, or would you propose other legislation?
Well, look, money is important, but also accountability. And there's got to be accountability in every single program that we have invested money in. But again, an investment in a veteran is a worthy investment. And if a program is working, we need to continue funding that program. If a program is not working, then we need to cut that program and reinvest that money somewhere else. But again, this particular bill, to provide free child care for single mothers or single fathers who are here by themselves, who have to go to work and find a place to leave their children, for Republicans to have voted against that, that is a shame.
Sylvia, my father was a veteran, and I actually experienced firsthand the problem that veterans face in this community with the antiquated systems and the backlogs in getting adequate services. After my father had gotten some care from Veterans Administration, he had passed away, and my mom received a bill 6 months later for $2,000 for the services that he had received. So I think that investing in the antiquated technology system is definitely a good use of money. And I really love it when Republicans pay lip service to our veterans. But when it actually comes to investing the money to improve the care that these brave soldiers deserve when they come home, they're AWOL. That's what Crescent Hardy has done. We look at Dina Titus, Senator Reid, fighting for good veteran care. And so I think that continuing investment, and I also want to say our Republicans are first to send our men and women into the line of duty. Yet there's $1.2 billion this year in unspent munitions was just wasted. We've been wasting millions of dollars developing mothballed military systems. Let's use that money and invest in the men and women who've risked their lives for this country.
Susie, would you consider privatizing health care under the Veterans Department Administration?
I think this is a vital service, and this is a promise that our government should make to our men and women, and I think we need to adequately fund it and adequately support and revamp the system so that men and women are not waiting months and years to get the care that they deserve.
So you would consider it. Would you consider privatization? No, you would not.
Thank you. So this issue, of course, is incredibly important, not just because we have a lot of military in CD4, but because this is a fundamental constituency in our country. And the fact that our veterans and our active military personnel are treated so poorly after they return, after their service, etc., it's just completely and totally unacceptable. And I couldn't agree more with everything that has been said so far in terms of how Republicans will say one thing and then turn right back around and do the exact opposite and cut funding and not offer the services that are necessary, whether it's mental health, whether it's support services for families, etc. So I think one of the most important things that we can also do as far as Congress people are concerned is to have strong constituency services for our veterans and for our service members. They go through a lot of red tape right now through the VA. I do believe that we need to not only increase funding, but also increase, of course, efficiency and accountability in the system. But one of the things that we can be most helpful in is pushing through those caseloads for our constituents and advocating and spending as much time and resources as we can to help every single one of our service members and veterans who come to our office for help.
Lucy, would you support having members of Congress give up their Cadillac health care plans and stand in line with the veterans and only go to veterans hospitals?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you. So, we've done a lot of good things for veterans in this community, but there's a lot more to be done. As has been noted, CD4 is a heavy military district. Remember, this district goes not only here, but all the way it's a Schurz, which catches Hawthorne, Tonopah, a lot of military folks. I'll just tell you, not a rock's throw from here, there was a veteran that came by our fire station all the time, who was obviously suffering from some mental illness. And we kind of took him under our wing. But we also then found that young man burned to death behind a dumpster. Literally, I can throw a rock from here to there. I don't think a veteran in this country should ever be in a situation like that. There was an issue with mental health, and we had a VA hospital 3 miles down the road. So there's obviously some problems that need to be fixed. Money is part of the issue, red tape is part of the issue, but this would be a priority for me when I am elected to this seat.
Would you support a tax increase if that was the only way to help our veterans?
I believe I would. Listen, I think we have to be held accountable as far as how the money is spent, but if it came down to the people who are protecting our freedoms and I had to pay a little bit more to make sure that they were well taken care of, I would do that.
Thank you, Sylvia. Actually, I'm remiss if I didn't ask, where are the veterans here in the crowd? Because I did miss a couple of them. Please raise your hand. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. I want to ask, we've all been asking questions about domestic policy. Let's at least have one question about foreign policy. And Susie, I'm going to start with you. And we're all kind of, as we've mentioned before, we have a lot of military in CD4, and you might be making some important decisions regarding the use of military force overseas. And in particular, the Taliban in Afghanistan are making headway. We spent billions and trillions of dollars, many, many lives in fighting in Afghanistan. President Obama decided to leave 100,000 troops in Afghanistan for more than 1 year. And if the military situation continues in Afghanistan with Taliban continuing to gain presence, would you vote to continue U.S. military troops in Afghanistan? Or would you say that's enough?
I think we have many instances of our policy in the Middle East and the unintended consequences that happen when we go into a country and we try to deal with a country that we don't know their community, and we struggle with it. And so I am a supporter of us looking at alternatives and how we build and work with allies who have a vested interest and a vested stake, and making sure that that situation is better controlled.
Lucy?
In terms of this issue, I think it's incredibly important to always spend a lot of time looking at all of the options. What we can do before we commit to putting boots on the ground. These are not boots on the ground, these are people. There are sons, there are daughters, there are dads, there are moms. And we have to take this very, very seriously. I think that at this point, there are still opportunities to work with our allies to put pressure and accountability on those allies in terms of what's going on in the region, in terms of the amount of money, for example, that's coming out of Saudi Arabia and supporting those types of terrorist activities, the arms, etc., that are coming out of the various countries into the region, and of course continue to work with our allies and those who are advising us on the best way forward. But I believe that we always have to ensure that we are erring on the side of caution, and that frankly we're always working towards a more peaceful solution. And if it finally gets to that point where we do have to escalate the activity in the region, then obviously that's something that we will have to consider. But we do have to do, in my opinion, everything necessary to avoid that.
For your applause. So thank you. I agree with a lot of what has already been said here. Diplomacy is key. I think you exhaust all methods of diplomacy first, and then assist with training and anything that we can do to help people better themselves. I think those two options are always the better options. And I hate the term boots on the ground, because those are human lives that we are putting in harm's way. And so before we are going to put human lives in harm's way, it would have to be a last resort.
Thank you. I believe that first and foremost, we should exhaust every single diplomatic measure out there. I believe in diplomacy. I believe in negotiated agreements, which is the reason why I was the only person running for Congress in this seat who came out in support of the Iran deal. This would have prevented a big war out in the region, and that is why I supported the deal, because I believe that we should sit down, have negotiated agreements before anything else, before sending more troops out there, before investing trillions of dollars like we did in the Iraq war, because first and foremost, these are families. These are people that we have to look out for first, but again, equally important is keeping our country safe, because that is the main responsibility, not only of the President of the United States of America, but also of Congress to protect our country, but I also believe in diplomacy and negotiated agreements.
So I've got a couple questions from the audience. And the first question has to do with people wanting to have more specifics on what you have done, what you have actually delivered in terms of your career, not just your personal narratives of your stories, which are very compelling, but people want to know what are the brass tacks of what you have actually been able to achieve in your professional lives. 3 of you were legislators. In delivering something that was tangible and that benefited the Latino community. And so I think we start with you, Lucy.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I think it's a really important one because you are going to hear a lot of words like fought for this, fought for that, I believe in this, I believe in that. But I think it's very legitimate to ask about records. Well, what have you actually accomplished? You're going to hear folks who say, I presented this or I presented that, but did that bill actually go anywhere? And I think that's absolutely important because I spent the last 4 years in the legislature with my head down and working. And I was successful, and I'm incredibly proud of those successes, particularly with bills that benefit every Nevadan, but also that benefit the immigrant community here in Nevada. For example, I passed and introduced and passed a bill regulating notarios and paralegals and people who were practicing law without a license and taking advantage of our immigrant communities and getting them in a lot of trouble and sometimes getting them deported. And these families couldn't do